Hello and welcome to Trutalk, a companion commentary podcast about The Truman Show created by me, Christopher Bingham. I love The Truman Show. It's my favorite film. Of all the movies I've watched, I've seen The Truman Show the most times. I'm probably on over 50 viewings at this point. I absolutely love it. I love talking about it. I can have endless conversations about it, speculating about the characters, talking about the little details, sharing goofs and trivia and whatever. I think a lot of film lovers will have that movie, in their collection that is just the one that they love talking about. And for me, it's The Truman Show. So in this first episode, I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the film, and then we're going to talk about the main topic, which is Truman Show as a kind of unintentional film about social media celebrity. In episode 2, we're going to talk about The Truman Show as a film about parents and children and parental relationships. In 3, we're going to ask, is The Truman Show about God? Is it a religious film? What are the religious allegories happening in The Truman Show? In episode 4, we're going to deep dive on some of the characters and we're going to talk about their motivations, their allegiances, and how we feel about them, how I feel about them, after 20 years of watching this film. In episode 5, we're going to talk about the kind of mystery detective element of the film and how my understanding of it has changed over the years that I've watched it. I'm basically going to kind of give you my personal headcanon. And then in the last episode, episode 6, we're going to talk about Easter eggs, little details, mistakes, and trivia, and we're going to wrap it up. A couple of notes about how I'm going to talk about certain things. If you know the film, obviously there is a show within the movie, and there are many characters in the film that are technically playing actors playing other characters. For ease, I'm going to refer to most of those characters by their character's name on The Truman Show. So Laura Linney plays Hannah Gill, who plays Merrill. I'm going to call her Merrill. Noah Emmerich plays Louis Coltrane, who plays Marlon. I'm going to refer to that character as Marlon. I'm not going to use their fictional actors' names very often because that just is going to make things too confusing. Massive spoiler warning. It kind of goes without saying, but spoilers, big spoiler warning. This movie is over 20 years old. So, you've had plenty of time to see it. This podcast will make a lot more sense if you have seen it, or maybe you have recently rewatched it. I would recommend watching the film and then listening to this podcast. By the end of this podcast, there won't be a thing you don't know about The Truman Show. So the ultimate spoiler warning. I'm drawing from a lot of different sources. Of course, there is the film itself and its soundtrack, its deleted scenes, the trailers that originally aired for the film, as well as a kind of strange 20-minute television segment that was separate from the film itself called Trutalk that only aired a few times.
Morning. Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
I fell in love with Truman when he was just a sonogram.
I grew up with Truman, and sometimes when I'm watching the show, I can see him really looking at me.
And there are also a bunch of articles and websites that helped me develop this podcast. So here's an overview of the film, and again, spoiler warning, this is the last time I'm going to tell you. What is The Truman Show? The Truman Show is a 1998 film directed by Peter Wier. It was written by Andrew Niccol. It stars Jim Carrey, Laura Linney, Noah Emmerich, Natasha McElhone, and Ed Harris. Its runtime is 1 hour and 43 minutes. It was made on a budget of $60 million. It carries a PG certificate. It was produced by Scott Rudin Productions, and it was distributed by Paramount Pictures. A bunch of really talented people worked on this film, and I want to mention their names up front here because, I'm going to talk about this quite on and off throughout the podcast. This is an example, in my opinion, of a film where every department is doing their best work. Every department seems, at least as far as the finished product is concerned, is doing they're working together really, really well. So it's not just a Peter Wier film. It's not just an Andrew Niccol film. It's also the producers, Edward Feldman, Lynn Plachette, Richard Luke Rothschild, Scott Rudin, Adam Schroeder. It's not just, them. It's also the cinematography by Peter Wier. It's the music by Burkhard Dalwitz and Philip Glass. And the production design is, we're going to have a whole thing about that. That was led by a guy called Dennis Gassner. Art direction by Richard L. Johnson. Everybody on this film seems to have really done such an amazing job. So I think it's worth remembering, like, up top, that a film takes a whole village of people to make, and all of these people played a part. More so, I think, than some films. This one demonstrates really amazing teamwork from every department.
Wow! That's amazing!
Truman Burbank, the film's protagonist, is the unwitting star of a reality show that broadcasts 24/7 and has done since he was born. He lives in an idyllic coastal town named Sea Haven, built under a giant dome that simulates the sky, weather patterns, day and night, etc. He has a wife, Meryl, and a dropout best friend, Marlon. Throughout his day-to-day life, he is recorded by a network of thousands of hidden cameras around town, mostly in everyday objects. We meet Truman as he's entering his 30s, living a repressed life as a suburban married man who sells insurance. He goes through the motions of his daily routine, but he dreams of adventure, of traveling the world, and secretly fantasizes about Sylvia, an extra he fell in love with in high school. The film is told through a mixture of scenes taking place in the dome, scenes involving the crew, and punctuated with cutaways of viewers watching at home. A man in a bathtub, a pair of old ladies, a Japanese family, and a couple of parking garage attendants. Truman starts to notice bizarre things happening. A studio light falls from the sky, a glitch on the radio that sounds like someone following him, and the apparent reappearance of his dead father in the street. As his curiosity and paranoia grows, his marriage starts to break down, and it becomes clear that the actress playing Meryl really dislikes Truman. Marlon, who appears to genuinely care for his friend, tries desperately to keep him on course. We meet his mother, an aging thespian wasp-like lady whose living room contains a giant portrait of herself. In a long flashback to high school, we learn more about Sylvia. The showrunners are trying their hardest to generate a meet-cute with Meryl, and all Truman can think about is this other woman, Sylvia.
If we don't go now, it won't happen.
They run out of the high school dance together, and they share a moment on the beach, but before she can reveal the true nature of the show, she's kidnapped by an actor claiming to be her father. Through her, we discover there's this grassroots Free Truman movement in the outside world. Truman's behavior gets more erratic. He tries to book a flight, but none are available. Then he tries to board a coach to Chicago, but the driver causes it to break down. Then he abducts Meryl and takes her on a joyride to see how far he can get, but he's eventually stopped by a road blockade, claiming to be the result of an issue at a local power plant. In a last-ditch effort to calm him down, the showrunners orchestrate a heartfelt moment with Marlon, where he reveals his father is in fact still alive and they're reunited. After this happens, it appears everything has calmed down and Truman returns to his routine. We're given a bit more context about his father, his adoption, and his childhood in an interview with the show's creator, Christoph, played by Ed Harris. Truman's last day in Sea Haven starts with the usual banter in the bathroom mirror. He exchanges banter with his next-door neighbor. He says his catchphrase, "In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night."
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Sells insurance, and he goes home again. He's sleeping in the basement when Christoph starts to worry that something is off. Truman is missing, and they don't know where he is. Every actor and crew member in the town begins this manhunt for him, sweeping through Sea Haven, but he isn't there. He's on a boat out to sea, apparently having conquered his fear of water. In one of the most iconic final scenes in film history, Truman braves a storm to reach the edge of the dome, only for the bowsprit of his boat to punch through the plaster wall of a painted sky. He finds himself standing literally on the edge of his world, at a door that leads to a dark unknown. Christoph speaks to him from overhead speakers and tries to convince him to stay, but Truman declines. He takes a bow and steps through the door. We see a jubilant Sylvia. We see various viewers celebrating Truman's escape. A defeated Christoph. Then the transmission cuts to static. The final shot of the film is the parking garage attendants asking what else is on.
CC transmission. You want another slice?
No, I'm okay.
What else is on?
Yeah, let's see what else.
Where's the TV guy?
So that's a kind of brief overview of the film. To understand The Truman Show, you need to place it in a little bit of context. So it was released in 1998, which means it had been in production for several years. This is about the same time that the Dutch reality format Big Brother was being worked on. That was developed from the year 1997 by its creator, John de Mol Jr., and it debuts in 1999, 1 year after The Truman Show. And it, completely changes the face of television. It leads this radical explosion in reality television. The UK Big Brother, which I'm, as a British person, I'm familiar with the most, launches in 2000, which is 2 years after The Truman Show. The Truman Show, released in 1998, means that it is 6 years before Facebook, 7 years before YouTube, and 8 years before Twitter, which launched officially in 2006. So it predates the social internet, and it kind of is just at the very beginning of the rise in reality television. Reality television kind of exists, but is yet to have this mammoth growth when The Truman Show comes out. Like a lot of good movies, The Truman Show is about a lot of things. But within this timeline, it's fairly easy to see it as a response to the kind of height of 90s celebrity culture, mixed with this new wave of reality celebrity just starting to arrive. In 2018, the film celebrated its 20th anniversary, and in an article for the BFI, Andrew Niccol said that it was about leaving home. He's also quoted in a different interview as saying, "When you know there is no camera, there is no reality." He was aware of this trend when he was writing this. He was already feeling critical of people who lead a kind of public life, it feels. One of the interesting things I came across in reading for this podcast was how preposterous a lot of the cast and crew felt it was at the time. Like, yes, it's about television and it's about celebrity and it's about kind of media manipulation, but in a piece by Julie Miller for Vanity Fair, members of the crew and the Paramount team reflect on how preposterous it felt at the time, and then being really surprised when life started to imitate art. The Truman Show ended up being incredibly prophetic about not only about the rise of reality television, but beyond it into this kind of modern world where we all kind of allow Big Brother into our lives in the form of surveillance capitalism and, the influencer generation. But it's worth remembering that in 1998, they didn't see that coming. They couldn't possibly have seen that coming. And in a lot of ways, The Truman Show then would have seemed so much sillier and so much more science fiction than it does now. So even though they didn't intend it, it can easily be read now as a film about social celebrity, about the social internet, and about surveillance capitalism. It deals with big ideas that we actually understand far better now than we did in 1998. Things like product placement.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this new Mococo drink? All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mountain Nicaragua, no artificial sweeteners.
Things like privacy invasion, and what Miller in the Vanity Fair article describes as the existential quandary of whether you live for yourself or an audience. That's something that, I feel a lot. I have felt so much over the years, and it's something that I'm always torn about, and I've made my own kind of attempts at art that try to pick it apart. I always find myself coming back to The Truman Show for inspiration, even though it wasn't intentional. There are a lot of things about The Truman Show, both big and small, that I can point to and say, like, that resonates for me as someone who works in social media, as someone who has kind of willingly spent huge chunks of his life turning his own life into a kind of Truman Show in the form of a video blog. I can point at elements of this film and say, like, that hits it on the head. One of them is the kind of the thing, and this is something that they talk about in the film and also is spoken a lot about in interviews with the creative team, that Truman's caught in this world where his mundanity, right, the fact that he is boring is kind of his selling point. The thing about Truman is that he has a routine and that he is mundane, and that makes him popular. He can sell stuff, right, because he is acceptable and he's kind of cute and he is family friendly and he doesn't seem to swear and he doesn't seem to have like volatile or controversial opinions. He shills hot chocolate, he shills fried chicken and furniture and clothes because he's an upstanding, likable, family-friendly person. He is an influencer, right? And when he goes off script, when he expresses his true feelings or becomes violent or angry or depressed, that space no longer exists. He's not doing what the showrunners want, and he can't generate them money. To me, it sounds like being a social media celebrity. For the most part, you are kind of, in one way or another, you're beholden to advertising, which drives all the platforms that you use. The Truman Show in the universe of the film seems to be wholly subsidized by advertising and product placement. So if they upset someone, if they go off air, if Truman is behaving badly, they're going to lose that revenue. He doesn't create anything as well, this is something that's, again, obvious, but worth mentioning. Truman is not a creator. He's not a creative. He's not a filmmaker. He's not an artist. He works as an insurance salesman.
I'm sorry, ma'am. If he's in a coma, he's probably uninsurable.
He sits at a desk and he gossips with people, and sometimes other actors will come up to him and they'll talk to him, and a pretty woman will walk past or whatever. He himself does not create things. He is the thing, right? He is the product being packaged and sold. And again, I think there are very direct parallels here with the way that both professional and amateurs on the internet kind of package themselves as a product. There is this tendency towards that in the modern media landscape, that you don't necessarily have to create anything, but you can be successful if you project a certain image, if you package yourself as a brand or as living a desirable lifestyle, which is, again, a thing that is constantly kind of touched upon and inferred throughout the film, that he lives in this idyllic world and that viewers want to buy the things, they want to buy the life that Truman has. Truman is always on. All right, and when I say that, I'm using it in the kind of theater term of like, you're on, you know you're in front of a camera, you know you're performing, and this has a lot to do with Jim Carrey's performance, which I think is fantastic. I think all the performances in this film are fantastic, but Jim Carrey brings to this role this sense that Truman is never quite relaxed. He always seems to be performing. Whether that is subconscious, it's something that maybe he has been trained into by living this life, or it's something akin to a kind of defense mechanism. He doesn't really quite trust the people around him, which we're going to get into. For whatever reason or combination of reasons, he is always lit up. He's always expressive. And again, this makes me think, because of my background, it makes me think of being a social media celebrity and feeling this need to always be performing, always be saying something, always feel like you have to comment on something that's happening, and that in either a narcissistic way, that everything you say matters and should be heard, every little thought that you have needs to be broadcast, or, which is kind of more damaging and more common, this idea of FOMO, this idea that you're going to fall behind if you don't, right? Meanwhile, on the other side of the screen, the vast viewing public discuss his life. They feel joy, they feel sadness, but they also feel this entitlement to discuss his private life like just another soap opera. We see again and again throughout the film cutaways to these people watching him like any other television show. And that's part of the appeal as well. That's part of the kind of rewatchability of this film, is the almost insignificance of Truman's life in some respects, that it's just another thing on television, and it's not a person's life, and he is entitled to no privacy in their worldview, and they can openly talk about his life, his marriage, his sex life, and they're entitled to have those opinions.
You never see anything anyway. They always turn the camera and play music, and the wind blows in and the curtains move, and you don't see anything.
Now that starts to break down a little bit if you want to compare it directly with social media, because this is being made, this film is speaking from a time when that two-way communication between an audience and a celebrity that we get on social media didn't exist yet. So it's grounded in a 90s dynamic, which is still fairly one way, or entirely one way for Truman, that the feedback that, that the potential kind of feedback or controversy or discussion, whatever, that he might get from his audience, he is shielded from. He doesn't read his comments, he doesn't get, at replies, right? So in one way that kind of is kind of distinctly different, is that, he can't hear what these people are saying about him, he can't communicate with these people, Truman can't read comments, Truman can't get cancelled, right? But in that way, Christof, the creator of the show, his shielding of Truman takes on new meaning for us. He becomes immune to criticism. He doesn't see, read, or hear any of this speculation, any of this drama, any of this discourse about him that is taking place on the outside world. And if you're anything like me, you might be a little bit jealous. I wish. I don't know how many times I've wished I couldn't see all the things people say about me. So yeah, The Truman Show is a film about social media. It's a film about being an influencer before influencers were even a thing. I'll leave you with a question on this first episode. Do you think a film like The Truman Show could be made now, in this decade, knowing what we know about social media and the internet? Personally, I don't think you could do it. One of the things that makes The Truman Show so good and so prescient is that it got there without trying to get there. So in the next episode of Trutalk, I'm going to break down The Truman Show as a film about parents, children, growing up, and parental relationships.